Bon après-midi tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici. Merci de votre présence à notre panel qui s'appelle Giving Body, Ambivalent Approaches in Digital Art. J'aimerais bien remercier Papier pour l'invitation d'organiser ce panel aujourd'hui. Je voudrais remercier Lina Kim pour tout son travail, Catherine La Franchise, ma collègue Victoria Carrasco qui a aussi fait beaucoup de coordination pour cet événement. Je voudrais aussi remercier les panélistes. J'ai Jenny Lin ici, Emily Keenley-Side et Erandy Vergara. Donc je vais commencer avec une introduction. A little introduction maybe to this panel, which is Giving Body, Ambivalent Approaches in Digital Art. We thought it was interesting, first of all, to be invited to do a panel, and there was a suggestion that we should talk about digital art, which was an interesting paradox, given that we're at an art fair dedicated to works on paper. But actually, there's quite an interesting link between the two, and I think that will come out during these presentations. And I thought also, just to help us a little bit, I should talk about what I was trying to get at when we were talking about ambivalent practices. Okay, wait. First of all, I just want to tell you I'm wearing sunglasses not because I think I'm trying to be, Karl Lagerfeld or something like that. It's just that I have a really horrifying eye issue right now, and I just do not want to subject you or the camera to any of it. So that's what's going on there. Ambivalence. It's really about the use of digital technology. And that it's not what technology can do, but rather what the artists can do with the technology that's at stake. It's being critical of the bells and whistles and novelty of technology to make it do something else. And that something else can sometimes be in opposition to the corporate and commercial interests that were originally behind the creation, and it can also address, I guess, concepts and issues. And sometimes technology can be used by artists to critique the medium itself, as we'll see in the work of Ed Atkins. The ambivalence essentially lies in the artist's interest in using digital technology, like sort of loving what it can do without being fully seduced by the technology or allowing their work to be technologically determined. So the artists we're going to be discussing are in many ways suspicious of new and perhaps trendy digital technology, and they instrumentalize them to get into the flesh and bone of the human condition. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about how the panel will unfold. Each of us are going to talk for about 15 minutes. And we're going to then open up to questions, and we really want this to be a discussion, so hopefully we'll get some juices flowing on the question side. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the new show that we just opened at DHC Art. It's called Modern Piano Music, and Ed Atkins is a British artist who's been doing unbelievable things, and we're incredibly proud to have him here. Ed Atkins instrumentalizes high-definition video, which is a bodiless medium, to create works that have the ability to bring us back to our own corporeal humanity. The large-scale video installations on view at the Foundation are created almost entirely from computer-generated animation, which produces an aesthetic that unsettles our perception of what is alive and what is animated. Each work features a male character who shares his most intimate emotions through gratuitously written monologues of existential longing and desperation that are punctuated by pop song fragments, bodily sounds, intertitles, stock footage, and the character's own occasions of bursting out into song. Atkins employs HD's verisimilitude to its fullest as every hair and pore is uncannily illustrated. Each bruise and contusion can almost be felt. He maximizes the use of words, image, and sound to poetic discordance. The flatness of the digital age meets a bloom of flesh, blood, feeling, and flaw. My first encounter with his work was the solo exhibition entitled Bastards at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris in 2014. And I was in the company of two close friends from Montreal, and together we immersed ourselves in Atkins's installation called Ribbons, which is now on display at DHC Art. Afterwards, we promptly made our way to the terrace bar because we just did not know we had no words for, to exchange. We just looked at each other with kind of troubled glances. And when I say we felt troubled, I really mean it, in the rich French meaning. On était troublé. It's like the result of an experience when things become clouded or disturbed, leaving you, a little flustered. First of all, there's the male character. He's got a very menacing look. And my base instinct read him as like skinhead or gym rat or soccer hooligan. But his poetic lament was so desperately indulgent and confounding. He had this beautiful voice that was truly stirring, and then these textual interruptions that are like redolent of drunk texting and corporate sloganeering, movie trailers, and self-help platitudes. It was the most sociopathic yet engaging thing. Later I learned that it's the artist himself who lends his own voice and facial expressions to his characters, which makes them more like surrogates and muddies the distinction between what is alive and what is not. These characters look you in the eyes, they confide in you, and they sing to you. I feel in response that I was moving deeper into the uncanny valley, but then the discomfort sort of segued into more curiosity, and you just don't leave. You stay, you're transfixed, you're sucked in. Ed Atkins was born in '82 and grew up in Oxford, England, and his mother was a high school art teacher, his late father a graphic designer at a publishing house. He describes them as both very talented artists. Ed himself did his MFA at the Slade School of Fine Art in London, and in a very short time, he's made a major impact garnering commissions for the Venice, Lyon, and Istanbul Biennials, the New Museum Triennial, and major solo exhibitions at the Palais de Tokyo, at the Stedelijk in Amsterdam, Castello de Rivoli. In 2016, at the age of 35, he entered Art Review's Power 100 list at number 50. All very interesting, considering he wasn't necessarily interested in studying art. He was much more compelled by music, cinema, and literature. It's kind of interesting that it should all become entangled in what his work has become, and notably that it is an extension of writing. He's a voraciously passionate reader and writer who greatly values the printed word. This is the primer for Cadavers. It's a collection of selected writings since 2011, and he's also produced drawings to accompany his installations. So the physical object and paper is infused with great meaning for Atkins. The link between digital and analog in his work is robust. Atkins also makes notable use of music. In his saturnalia of words, images, and sounds, he employs snippets that tantalize, like a signature 4-bar phrase from Drive by the Cars. Do you remember that song, like slow dance song from the 80s? Or Elton John and Kiki D's Don't Go Breaking My Heart. These little things, they just float around in his works. He uses them to maximum emotional effect, but in ways that kind of rip the rug right from out of your feet. These glimpses become loops and earworms, and they suggest subtexts and metatexts running concurrent in what might be absolutely concurrent to what might be happening on screen. In this work, Safe Conduct, which is also at the foundation, he pushes the sense of recognition to hysterical effect, accompanying the horror on screen with the entirety of Ravel's Bolero. It's basically a work that is a send-up or a hysterical, absurd send-up of airport security videos. And then there's the singing, the most intimate and vulnerable use of voice. When Atkins's surrogates burst into song, your heart just melts. They become moments of redemption. I'm also intrigued what I've described as a critical, engaged, or ambivalent use of digital technology. What he says is, I'm not interested in technology per se, it's what technology does that matters, what it changes. The content as discursive stuff is centuries old. These ideas about identity and representation and rendering have been here forever, and that's what I'm getting at. Even the projection screens in the installation are these very heavy, thick architectural things. They're not sort of like film screens that we can just lose ourselves into. Rather than a kind of cinematic, illusory world, his works, because they are sort of almost real, they bring us back to our own bodies, and we're in those spaces suddenly reminded that we're flesh and bone and sweat, and we make poop and all of these incredible things about the human experience. Through offbeat timing, I would say he has a crazy sense of editing, a crazy rich way to play with all of our expectations that are developed by cinematic language, television, and then he completely foils them. You think he's going somewhere, and then all of a sudden he cuts to another place, and you're like, "What the hell happened?" But it's a kind of a wonderful thing, and you have to, and you just let yourself go into it. In the spirit of media art pioneers like Hollis Frampton and Michael Snow, Ed Atkins employs reflexively the contemporary imaging tools of digital technology in order to interrogate the medium itself. Through his love of words and his own performance through these works, he makes us aware of the complex relationship between a disembodied digital world and the desire for real connection with our bodies and with each other. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now gonna pass this, the magic clicker, to Erandy Vergara. Erandy is the director of Studio XX and also an independent curator who has just defended her PhD. Woohoo! Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's good. Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. Merci pour être là. So I'll speak in English, but feel free in the Q&A just to ask in n'importe quelle langue que vous voulez. English, Spanish, and French will be most appreciated. So I'm happy to participate in this roundtable because I study art history, and the thing that interests me the most is the history of the relationship between art and technology, and the experimentation of artists with technologies like computers, photocopies, scanners, and other more complex technologies like sensors, virtual reality. So I'm in the right place. And I definitely been studying the ambivalent approaches to media art, always with this critical perspective. So I'll start with a personal story, and then I will discuss the work of a few artists that I think are key examples of key issues of the use of technology in contemporary art practices. So the personal story is I like going to museums when I grew up, and since the year like 2000, I began to see a lot of computer pieces in museums. And I always wonder, how did they get here? And you know, I had no art historical training. I just liked to see art. And I never understood the historical link. And also the conceptual link. I wasn't familiar with this story. And so that question, how did the computer, how these experimental uses of technology got to the art world, fascinated me and led me to study the history of art and technology. And so the first key reference I like to start with is a piece that Nam June Paik, and so he was a Korean American artist, and this piece is entitled Magnet TV. It's a very simple piece. He only used the technology of the time, TV set, 65, 17 inches black and white screen, TV set. And he put a magnet on top of it. And so the idea, again, simple, was that spectators or the artists could play with the magnet and then play with the signal. I like this example because it's a very straightforward, simple technology, just a TV set. But he was going into working with the materiality of the medium. And the materiality in that case was the TV signal. And so instead of using the broadcast image, he was just transforming the signal itself. So here there are 2 points I like to make. One, he was using a technology of his time. So there was this excitement about using and seeing what he could do with it. But also there was the idea of how about I leave a little bit of space for the spectator to do something with the signal. So how can he or she modify the signal and also make sense of, change the form of the work, and also the perception of the work then will be linked to that personal experience. So that's one example. And today I'd like to share with you some of the key premises of media art. So I divided my presentation in 4 stories, and here we go. So first story is love and hate relations with technology. The second one is interact or die. The third one is realities and virtualities. And the last one is connection and disconnection. So these are 4 key themes and moments, and I will tell you why I selected them. So the first one, love and hate relations with technology. The subtitle of the section is A Never-Ending Story, because this is really how the history of art and technology has always been one of love and hate. On the one hand, as Cheryl mentioned, artists are excited and they want to get a hand on these technologies, they want to transform it. And on the other hand, they're also suspicious and they don't buy the whole thing. So, since the 60s, since artists began to use technologies with more emphasis, these positive and negative or critical stand have been present. So many artists believe that through the use of technologies, people get access to new ways of interacting with technologies, interacting with each other, and they believe there are certain forms of empowerment embedded in that relation. And there are others that are more suspicious, and they're concerned about the impact of technologies in the way we think, the way we engage with each other, and also even the ecological impact of technologies. So while some artists are ready to choose one side or the other of this positive critical spectrum, there are some others that navigate in between the two. And so one key example I'd like to discuss is this piece by Swiss painter and sculptor Jan Tingley. And it's a kinetic piece presented at the Sculpture Garden at the MoMA in 1960. And so he used different pieces of bicycle wheels and kitchen appliances, a piano, and a radio. And the whole deal of the piece is that it destructed itself within 30 minutes. So it's a critique of the industrial technological society and a critique of the machine. So this early piece is a key example of this ambivalent relation with technology. The second example is a piece by Evan Franco Mates. It's entitled My Generation, and I just love this piece. It's a series of online clips the artist took online from frustrated video game players. So they use a basically useless, broken down computer, but that still is able to show these videos. And it's just, these videos just show young players embodied in violent outbursts of anger at their computers after they lose a game, for example. So it's a funny and ironic piece of a generation that grew up with computers. Okay, second story, interact or die. And so I use this title. There is a book entitled Interact or Die, and I like it. It captures the spirit of the idea of interactivity as being a defining characteristic of media, art, and also for society, how we engage with people and with technology. But I use it rather ironically. I like to discuss some examples of interactive work that have a more ambivalent relation with technologies and create encounters between our spectators that can be problematic. So the first piece is entitled See Banff, is by American artist Michael Newmark. It's an early piece at the time of the first wave of virtual reality. And it was produced at the Banff Center in 1993. And it looks like an Edison kinetoscope. Its logic is simple. It's a binocular vision. And there is a crank on the side, so people can use the crank to browse back and forth and navigate spaces. They can choose one of the views of Banff. The images show they were filmed around Alberta, rural Alberta or Banff. They show waterfalls, glaciers, mountains, and farmlands. And some of them also show classic tourist views of Canada and popular natural trails. So what is interesting is that this piece cancels the possibility of a coherent landscape, because in many ways, there's always tourists who doesn't let you see the picture. So, there is this idea of interactivity. You can select some of the scenes you want to navigate, but you cannot see it. And so the process brings you back to your own interaction here, because you have the desire to see these images, and the tourist doesn't let you do it. So interaction is here somehow frustrated. Another example is Spain Station. It's a 2004 piece by Fur. It's a artistic duo from Germany. And so it consists of a console table of a game that is not fun when you're losing. So the idea is it's based on a Pong game. It's an early computer game. And so there's two players, one facing each other. And it's normal, right? They have to score points by hitting a ball with a bat. Except that it has a twist. So with the right hand, you control the game. And with your left hand, you have to keep your left hand in this paint execution unit. So if you miss a ball, you're in trouble. The paint execution unit releases heat, electric shocks, or just a quick whipping on the hands of the players. So the players have to endure pain, or they have to see their opponent suffer. The game is over when one of the players releases the left hand, so the one that is being punished. So many players carry their bruises with pride, and some of them also have this troubling interaction of seeing someone else being hurt. But interestingly, many people prefer to be hurt than to lose the game. So this is some of the encounters with the piece. And you can really get bruises, and you have to sign an agreement that you agree to the terms of the game, and you understand you can get hurt. All right, so third story, virtual realities and virtualities. And the idea here is I want to talk about two common ideas in relation to new technologies, the idea of immateriality and disembodiment. And I don't know if you heard this idea that many people refer to internet as the virtual space, a non-space made out of code that is not physical but rather immaterial. The same is said about virtual reality or video games, and there is the idea that these media are not physical and that we can navigate them without even moving from our chairs. So many people talk about how with these technologies and gadgets, we live our lives and social interactions with a sense of detachment from our bodies. So therefore, the idea of disembodiment. So I want to discuss one example that questions this idea of immateriality and disembodiment. And it's another in early virtual reality piece by Charlotte Davis. The title is Osmose. And it's a fascinating piece. It employs a head-mounted display, and the idea is users can interact, but they have to interact using their breath and using their torsos. So their breath is used to navigate the space vertically, and their torsos, they have to tilt, lean in, or move to navigate the space horizontally. So the experience lasts about 15 minutes. During this time, people can select around 12 different landscape or spaces, and they consist of abstract spaces, also ocean-like spaces, forest. And so, for instance, here the idea is that you're having this experience with the head-mounted display, but people can also see the projection of what you're seeing. So there's another way to engage with it, which is not with the head-mounted display. So, but you can see here the idea of this embodiment, it kind of is trouble. And this is a very embodied piece, not only because you have to use your breath and movement to interact, but also because the helmet is heavy, and you have to adjust to navigate this new space. So it's it's actually a very embodied experience. Last story, connections, disconnection with yourself and with others. So much of the discussion about art and technology have focused on discourses of connectivity and democracy, about identity, play, and the idea many times is that technology brings people together and make us connect. And I like pieces that trouble that idea. So one I really like is this piece by this Chinese artistic duo, Sun Yuan and Peng Yu. It's All People's Home. It's a 2007 piece. And this has bold political connotations of disconnection. It consists of 13 life-size sculptures of elderly men confined by age to wheelchairs. It's automated wheelchairs that support these decaying figures around the empty gallery. And so they're continuously clashing. They have no sense of direction, so they just clash. And they withdraw, they connect and disconnect. They move in the same space, but never get close, never communicating, never agreeing on anything. So it's a very powerful political symbol of these political leaders that they represent. So people can enter the installation and move around the world leaders. And I like this work because it's different from many works from Europe and North America, where robots in motion enable happy encounters and moments of connectivity between humans and machines, or among humans. This work insists on the distance between the self and the other, and invite spectators to see themselves as part of those clashing political views. The last piece I want to show is a piece that will be shown at Ovoro in May. And it's a piece by a young artist based in Montreal, Martin Frossard. It's titled The Gaze. And the idea is basically there is this woman in the chair. There is a video projection, and in front of it there is an empty chair. You're invited to sit on it. And when you sit on it, you will trigger one of the randomly, it will play one video of this woman making certain gestures. So there is a silent dialogue of this woman who will make certain faces. And so you're there and you're trying to guess, is she angry? Am I boring her? Is she disturbed by my presence? So another very simple example that triggers this idea of to what extent we try to communicate and sometimes we're not able. How do we deal with people when do not agree, or we're actually in this ambivalent state of trying to understand how the other is reading and trying to react to different emotions or different facial gestures and inhabit that space of contradiction and ambivalence. And so these are some examples that, of works that invite different readings, but certainly establish some love and hate relations to technology, and proximity and distance, embodied reactions, and in some cases produce discomfort. So I'll be happy to listen to the other presentations and answer to any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erandy. Wow, it's great to have that, to have all that contextualization and situating for us. Next, my wonderful colleague, Emily Keenlyside, educator at DHC Art since 2011.
Thank you. I think I can do it. I don't have to. Thank you. Merci beaucoup d'être venu. Thank you so much for coming. So today my presentation is based on the action research and shared reflections of my team at DHC Art Education. So I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues for their contributions, Amanda Beatty, Daniel Fizet, and Marie-Hélène Lemaire. I'll be talking from the perspective of a gallery educator, which will shift the focus for a few moments to the relationship between digital media and the visitor. I'll identify some of the broader questions we address with our groups around digital artworks, and through a couple of case studies of past exhibitions at DHC Art, I'll highlight some key concepts, experiences, and strategies we've employed. In doing so, I'll consider how, as gallery educators, we attempt to cultivate a kind of productive ambivalence that takes up a space between the love-hate, I think, that you were talking about earlier, but what we sort of describe also as a resistant pessimism and perhaps a naive optimism. So to consider how we navigate this space with our groups through our focus on dialogue, movement, and embodiment. So what is our educational approach? How do we think about learning in the gallery space? We favor a dialogue-driven approach that comprises free viewing time, followed by group exchange about the artworks that speak most to the participants who are with us. We always let them choose. We recognize that engaging in this way is not just an intellectual and social exercise, but it also involves the body, its senses, and its movements through the exhibition space. Together for each exhibition, we assemble a collection of what theorist Mickey Ball calls traveling concepts. And these shape our understanding of the exhibition, and they reveal themselves over the course of the exhibition from visit to visit according to the contributions and the curiosities of the participants we work with. And the key ideas shaping how we approach dialogue and movement, I would say, include authenticity, agency, access, and service. So before I start with the case studies, I'll let you know what are some of the broader questions we ask participants to consider when we're in interaction with digital art. So we consider the relationship between image and sound. We reflect on form and analysis, for example, of video editing, time, light, rhythm. To think about the body, visitors' relationship to their own body as they move through the space, feelings of comfort and discomfort, and how the body is represented or not in the work. Does the technology reveal itself? What illusions does the artist break or not? And if so, how? And how active or passive is our experience? How can we define interactive? And we also ask questions around control and power. So coming back to this idea of a productive ambivalence, we consider this space really fertile ground for learning. It highlights participant subjectivity. It reminds them that there's no fixed meaning between each other, that conflict and contradictions can enrich our perspectives, and that our initial impressions, even our second readings, they're never static. They can change with time, with extended viewing, listening, and immersion. That was Erandy's thank you. We should go back. So this is the first case study that I'll share with you. This is a work by Ryoji Ikeda. Datamatics is an art project comprising audiovisual concerts, installations, publications, and CD releases. Ikeda collaborates with mathematicians and describes this project as a series of experiments that seek to materialize pure data. The project started in 2006 and explores, to paraphrase Ikeda, our potential to perceive the vast invisible data that permeates our world. Two of these experiments were exhibited in our large satellite gallery space. The first one, which you see at the far end of the gallery space is called Datatron. It's an immersive audio-video installation comprising a monumental single-screen projection. And correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl, but this wall is almost six meters in width, if I'm not mistaken, and right up to the ceiling, so it was quite large. And Data Matrix consists of 10 projections of roughly 1 square meter. So both works explore how abstractive views of reality are used to code, decipher, and control the world. And here I'm paraphrasing our past curator, John Zapatelli. And they really exceed by their own design, our own cognition, our own ability to perceive them. So as you'll see from the next couple of photos, we engaged our visitors, including our young ones, as you see here, in free movement around the gallery space. And this is something that the work itself encourages, but we did so even more so in our own spaces. And I'd just like to mention that we had an elementary school teacher who regularly visits our exhibitions at the foundation. She recently spoke to us about this work as a really formative experience for her and her students. It was the first time she'd ever come to our spaces. And she said that they were absolutely thrilled to be able to lie on the floor, place their bodies against the wall. And she really emphasized this idea of becoming part of the work. And you see that. You see this, all of this data projected on the bodies of these people. And so she described it actually as an extraordinary experience that she said they would never forget, but because it was such a departure from their usual relationship to works of art. This next picture, I'm not sure from a distance if you can see it very well, but this is my colleague Amanda lying on the floor with these kids. And I wanted to show you this because this is also a really important part of our approach when we want people to, when we want to encourage people to move in a space. We think it's important that we do the same, that we model these movements. And so even if we're pregnant, we'll lie on the floor with 7-year-olds to show them how we can be in this space if we want to. And so we, as a team, think this kind of intense, in this case, synesthetic experience, this crisscrossing of the senses, is in and of itself an ambivalent, stimulating, disorienting experience. Another couple anecdotes with this work, my colleague Daniel mentioned that a few years prior to the Ikeda show, he remembers reading a news item about specific high-pitched sounds that some store owners were using to prevent teenagers from loitering. And he was really intrigued by this as an example of how technology was being used to control how bodies move and to control access and comfort in public space. And he was reminded of this when a number of kids that went through this exhibition commented on how the sound of this piece really bothered them. It really hurt their ears quite a bit. And so we haven't read anything to the effect that this was intentional, but it does speak to these competing, however random, uses of technology for, that is, aesthetic effect versus the policing of bodies. Another rich space which combined creation and interpretation was a partnership that we had with a photo camp, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But with the green light from Ikeda, over the course of a summer, dozens of adolescents documented this installation with digital cameras, using essentially the same encoded, decoded binary code that they're photographing to store their images. So Daniel, our resident photo expert, compared this to asking kids to take pictures of the sun with analog cameras. It was a really rich experience for them. So my next case study is Cory Archangel, and in fact, we have 3 Cory Archangel works behind us. So this is an interesting backdrop for this particular case study. So self-playing Nintendo 64 NBA Courtside 2 from 2011 is an installation comprising a hacked Nintendo 64 console and wall projection. The image reaches, this isn't a much smaller gallery than the one that you just saw, but the image does reach down to the ground and features a larger than human scale representation of basketball star Shaquille O'Neal. He was already quite big, so Shaquille, he repeatedly and indefinitely takes unsuccessful shots at the net. The game console and the controller are on the floor of the exhibition space, along with speakers, a subwoofer, mixer, and a projector. And in his hacking of the console, Archangel also replaced the protagonist, which was originally Kobe Bryant, with Shaquille O'Neal, and created this loop of image and sound. So with this work in particular, we found that learning occurred over relatively distinct phases, people integrating themselves into the space, feeling disconnect or dissonance with the content, and finally decoding the installation and their experience of it. Just move on to the next one here. So first, there's shadows. They interfere with the projection, and there's a certain uncertainty about where to place your body. And then once what you might call shadow play starts, there's a new tension. The work disrupts visitors' usual relationship to video games. They can't play. They've got no control. It's always the same outcome, failure. And like the Ikeda installation, the work challenged many visitors' expectations of a gallery setting, gave space for us to consider together how our behavior is shaped or dictated by it. And a few other examples of ambivalence that we remarked with this work. There's this sense of passivity that comes with a game that can't be controlled, coexisting with a sense of freedom of movement in the space. And I would argue as well that this sense of freedom or excitement also came with the artist's process of hacking the console, and also his unbridled fandom. He really loves these games, and the sense of nostalgia and excitement that comes with these works is really strong. And also the playfulness and the humor that coexisted with this discomfort that not only came with the frustration of this loop of failure, but also the sound resonating in the body. And for any of you that might have seen this exhibition, the sound of the ball dribbling, the echo of that was just incessant, and it really resonated very strongly in the body. So that's my second case example. I'll just show you one more. This is Joan Jonas. This is last year. And Joan Jonas, a pioneer in video art, she created this relatively recent work from 2010 in classic Joan Jonas style, 2010, 2012, and 2013. It is a multimedia installation comprising wood, Japanese paper screen, a rectangular metal structure that you may or may not be able to see very well from where you are, and this metal structure with hanging crystals and 2 video projections. So the video projection on the right is projected onto the wall. It's a collaboration with composer Jason Moran, and it's based on the 1968 novel Under the Glacier by Icelandic writer Halldór Laxness. It's set in Norway and displays these landscapes interspersed with black ink drawings on snow and shots of mountains, and also projections of these crystals. It's also accompanied by songs sung by Sami singer Andy Samby. And then to your left is a video called Ice. It's a 2.5-minute video, silent, and projected onto a screen. And the screen was actually 2-way, so we could see it from the other side as well. And it shows the artist's hands drawing with ink and melting ice cubes, and also includes the visual effects that come from the crystals installed in front of the screen, between the screen and the projector. So in this, the last of 4 consecutive installations in our main gallery space, groups were nearly always seated for extended and silent viewing times. They experienced a space that challenged traditional representations of landscapes and that allowed for more than one viewer and offered multiple viewpoints. Barbara Clausen, who was our guest curator for this show, calls Joan Jonas a storyteller working with time and space. And this idea really guided us through the bulk of the show. This landscape is fragmented, it's fleeting, transitory, in constant flux. And Jonas harnesses the medium to create overlapping images and constant repetition. The format of the video isn't HD, it's standard quality, so it's a little bit more grainy. And so here Jonas works with the technical defects of the medium to create a very particular atmosphere. And she uses a handheld camera, and that creates a certain unstable and partial vision, really, that puts us in a very particular relationship to her body. So there's this discomfort for the visitors of never being still, of never experiencing continuity in the images nor a conventional narrative, and it never indulges the desire for certainty, fixity, control, or clarity. You may or may not be able to also see this grid, the white lines on the right-hand video. And this was a really intriguing aspect of the work for our visitors. It evoked ideas of measuring, mapping, locating, but in a way it also prevented visitors from really entering the image. So there's this invitation to enter the landscape, but the grid is always there to disrupt that invitation. Ice is a silent video, but it's in direct contrast with the soundtrack from Reanimation. And similarly, the proximity between the two screens means that we're always having to shift back and forth between them. And then finally, if you can see where the projector is placed on the floor, you can see how it's an obstacle to the body's movement in the space. And in conjunction with the crystals, it creates shadows that draw our attention to the relationship between the material and the non-material. So just to wrap up, the exhibitions that I've highlighted demonstrate three different relationships to digital media that we could unpack with our groups through embodied dialogue. Ryoji's work explores the accumulation of data, societies of information and control, and technology's relationship to power and economics. And here we see the artist's role in making this visible and tangible. Corey Archangel's work exploring technology as a mainstay of popular culture. He's an active participant in the hacking culture, and we see here the artist interfering with available systems like game consoles, films, to offer commentary on the world. And finally, Joan Jonas, as I mentioned, a pioneer in video art, using technology as a tool for image making and playing with the specificity of the medium. She also harnesses the potential of repetition and what she calls translation, which is basically reworking older works in the production of new ones, to blur the distinction between documentation and the art object. So these ongoing questions about the tension between material and non-material are particularly relevant for our current show, for Ed Atkins, but they're a big part of what attracted us to Jenny's practice. And it's why we approached her to collaborate with us in the design of a workshop that would complement group learning in the galleries through the act of creation. So I will hand it over to her now.
Thank you, Emily. Amazing. Jenny Lin, artist, instructor in studio arts at Concordia University. Jenny's work is often narrative-based, blending the familiar and banal into absurd or fantastical scenes in which the everyday is somehow disrupted. She's also, as Emily just mentioned, been invited by DHCR to create a workshop in dialogue with Ed Atkins' exhibition. So she's going to discuss her work, and you're going to tell us what you've cooked up for the workshop too? Yeah? Okay.
Okay, so, all right. So I just wanted to start off, this is a relatively older work, like it's from 2000, but I wanted to show an example of a work that was my entry point into working with digital media or digital technology, and that was with working with video. So I came to Montreal to do my MFA, and I studied in print media. And I guess at the time I was finding it a bit frustrating at that moment to try to convey whatever it is that I was trying to convey through like a printed matter, like through a still like 2D piece of paper, basically. But I was introduced to video editing, and I found it really pretty freeing and inspiring. So my approach to this was like looking at it as a way of kind of really working with this highly processed sort of image, like really working the image through like really low tech, like kind of it was like SD video, and adding like a lot of processing and texture, and bringing together live action, which was my own clumsy sort of acting, together with like found footage from films, and then just like collaging it together. So I wanted it this really fake looking and constructed lo-fi environment, and just really trying to explore like the kind of alien abduction story or the sci-fi alien story as a way of looking at the body, like scrutinizing the body that doesn't fit into like normalcy, I guess. Like so, in this video, I perform as the alien abductee, and then like it was also shown as exists as a single channel video, but also like a multi-channel installation. In which it's paired with like these really low-tech kind of campy like kind of materials that you can enter into the gallery as a kind of UFO landing site and go inside and kind of view these images or moving images on a console or on the wall of the tent of the UFO. Yeah, so then I also use a lot of, like I'm constantly using digital technology to use to edit videos or to create artist books and zines, and just sometimes really not really trying to make like something that looks digital, but just use the technology as a way of bringing things together and animating or putting them in sequence. So I see a link really in video, like moving video, and also like book formats. Like I see them as both being time-based media and something sequential that you reveal over time. And then also just I'm interested really in this handheld format, like sort of thinking about the artist book and the zine as something like this intimate space that is tactile, that the viewer can pick up and hold and potentially own as well. So my partner and I have this micro press called B&D Press. We make our own sort of like, it's like self-published zines that we will create our own content in book format. Like so, like bringing together often like image and text, or just and bringing these to zine fairs or art book fairs as a way of exhibiting or just disseminating them. And I also, like, so those often exist as open editions, but I also work with like sometimes like these limited edition hand screen printed and hand assembled books. And I guess like, so this is an example of one which I worked with like autobiographical content, which was based on this bike accident that I had in 2009. And it's actually like a work that's a lot more earnest and direct than I'm usually interested in like, I'm not normally interested in that sort of approach, but I just found the experience to be so strange in itself that I felt that it didn't need like all this sort of fantastical setting. Like it was just kind of fantastical in its own being, I guess. At the time I was working as a medical illustrator, and also just really interested in looking at the ways that paper could be interactive. Like so in historical, like anatomical pop-up books, the body could be navigated through by revealing like layers of the body through, say like the layers of tissue, bone, and organ could be understood through like a pop-up book or like a series of flap. I guess it's called a flap book as well. So through this book, I was trying to explore like a kind of like a first-person perspective and just really share the experience, like bring the viewer to kind of witness whatever I was experiencing through that day, and then also just bringing people. I guess I was interested in just like the repetition of the story, because like accident stories are so commonplace, and as soon as you tell your own, somebody will tell their own, and I just found like I was having to repeat the story over and over to so many different people in different sorts of ways, depending on what the context was. And it was just sort of like looking at pop-up as a way of kind of revealing like the passage of time. Or also just trying to bring together the visualization of the layers of the body, the physical body, paired with like a kind of psychological experience, like this kind of feeling of tension that I was feeling that felt as if it was like right behind my eyes or something, like I could like almost visualize it as a knotted piece of rope or something like that. So this book also exists in zine format because I wanted to make the book accessible and easier to reproduce. So this is like an open edition book in which it's just much easier to and more affordable for people to hopefully have or view, and just takes way less time to assemble or no time to assemble. I was still interested in thinking about the accident story because I felt like there were limitations to like this kind of like very earnest and direct kind of storytelling book format, and that brought me to working with digital media again. So working with, for the first time, it was 3D drawing using Blender. And to do this, I kind of was looking a lot at these kind of like thinking of interactive video games, but really wanting to insist on making this thing myself in spite of the fact that I had never done anything like this before. So anyways, the aesthetic was like, I felt like it was kind of okay to have like this very clunky and clumsy and unrealistic aesthetic, because I was really coming from this experience of in the 80s, like growing up with Commodore 64, lo-fi aesthetics of video games, like Impossible Mission is like this game where you go through a building and you do all these like acrobatics, jumping over robots and try not to get vaporized, and then you search through furniture to try to find puzzle pieces in order to find your way out of this building. I guess at the time I was also, while making Replay, I was really interested in these kind of like free online games that are called room escape games. And they're these they're very tacky, like they're really simple and mindless games that I find really relaxing. So the goal is just like you go through, click through the space and then just try to find different sorts of objects which you collect, and sometimes you bring them together and then build them into something that will help you so that you can escape the room. But what I'm interested in is all these like kind of really polished looking spaces, like these really like kind of like 3D rendered spaces that look really fake and kind of ugly but yet calming. Like, so I got obsessed with them. Like I was just playing them constantly and like this one too. And so that's what I was thinking about with Replay. Like I felt like maybe by working in it's still relatively sequential, but the idea is that you navigate through space. So you try to find like a button that will bring you to progress you to the next scene. And sometimes it's very obvious, like the whole screen is a button, so there's no way that you can go wrong. But then on certain pages, like there's like it's not very obvious. Like it might be that the button to go to the next scene is like actually like you would have to scroll down and click on something that's not even initially on screen. So I feel like it's this really frustrating game, very clumsily made, but I like that about it, and I feel like somehow that sort of effect really maybe more accurately captures this experience of frustration and stasis and this kind of strangeness of the situation. So there's some scenes where you click on, like for instance this one, you click on the hand and it levitates your perspective so that the hand and your point of view are way above and detached from the lower part of the body. Or there's a lot of scenes where there's like a shift in texture, like a reference to stone or like heavy, like weightiness basically. And just like reference to objects, like so inanimate objects as these kind of trigger points that bring you back to a particular moment in time, or like that behave in a way that is outside of their regular function. And this exists in or did exist. It exists on the web. It's on there right now, I guess, and it also has existed in installation format. So at HTMLs, at group intervention video, it was paired with these paper objects, and then more recently at Clark Gallery for the HB exhibition, it was shown on screen as a computer at a desk. Maybe I'll show one more thing and then I'll cut out the last few slides, but I just was interested in going back to paper and this idea of interactivity and storytelling. I consider this to be a zine, but it's like this folded double-sided poster that's screen printed. And I'm interested in the way that like the viewer can still kind of interact by unraveling that experience. Like, so just kind of like progressing the story by unfolding it and then becoming somehow implicated in that process. But for this, like, I guess like along with some of the more recent works that I'm working on, it's this interest in working with this kind of like sort of excessive emotional expression where I'll start with something from personal experience and then try to just go with it to a point where I feel like I'm enacting something, like I'm no longer that person, but I'm kind of taking it into like a role play and like a fictional scenario or a point of exaggeration. So it's like this is like kind of a stemming from like the ideas of anticipatory grief or loss, like just like thinking about the potential for death. But it's like this weighty kind of subject that I tried to approach in a way that was like really influenced by like heavy metal, like death music, and just kind of like taking it to this point where I don't know if other people see it, but to me it became funny. Like it was like in sequence, like the more you look at it, the more ridiculous it looks. And at some point there, for me at least, there was like a catharsis, like just like a point where things flip over and are no longer, like they're just ridiculous in a way. So this is the other side. And I'll just skip through this. This is like a recent zine, sort of similar sentiment, and a recent print with like pairing text and image. Maybe I'll just mention briefly, like this is like kind of like really trying to pare down fragments of text that are just like thoughts that pop into mind from everyday life, but just like really thinking of like the inanimate object as representing the body and frustration and like potential loss and so on. But yeah, and these are also just like, I'm not sure, I think these will probably take some sort of digital form, but I'm really not sure about these. They're new works in progress. And then that brings us to the workshop. So with the DHC education team, it's been a real pleasure to work with them, and we're we developed together like this workshop that's going to be a collective augmented reality zine. So it's the idea of like participants coming together and creating a zine or a self-published book together. And it's going to be just to invite the participants to think about like an inanimate object that they have a psychological relationship with. So it could be like some object that you carry around in your pocket that's like a anxiety reducing stone or something, or it could be like, say, like a memento that you have that reminds you of a particular time or place or person. But participants would be asked to basically like either photograph, draw, or find like a found image of some sort of object, and then think about like either a one word or a short sentence, like maybe a short phrase of words that they associate with those objects. So kind of like basically the images of objects will be printed into the collective zine, and you'll be able to take like a phone or a tablet and put it over the images, and that would activate like the words. Like, so basically it's like the overlay, like the virtual overlay layer, would be text, and that would kind of like represent like a collective poem that's sort of like the psychological layer of like what gets triggered from viewing these objects. So it's using this this free app called Orasma, and it's like if you wanted to, it's actually super easy to use. Like you can make this kind of augmented reality experience in a matter of seconds. Like it sort of works like Pokemon Go. Like it's like you have like this image recognition software that either it can work in space or it can be triggered by a photo of an image and so on. So hopefully, I mean, I'm looking forward to that and seeing how people react to it. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Awesome. So, by the way, I would really like an anxiety-reducing stone. So if you, okay, maybe you can... We have a few minutes for questions. Lina Kim va circuler avec un micro. Et tu sais, pendant que nous préparons nos questions, je vais juste aussi remercier ma collègue Sophie Couture parce que c'est elle qui nous a mis ensemble DHCR et Papier. Merci Sophie. Donc, une question ou deux? All right, yay.
Hello. Je pose la question parce qu'on est dans le contexte de Papier, qui est une foire de collectionneurs en priori. Tout ce qui est art numérique, quel est le rôle du collectionneur ou comment on voit cet art de collectionner avec l'art numérique plus précisément, je me demandais.
Do you want to talk a little, do you want to respond to that a little, Erandy, what you've seen in your travels?
I guess I can make one point about like media art. Many people still collect media art. Like even videos, for instance, people buy video pieces and they, before it used to be VHC and then CDs and then DVDs. So there has always been a sense of collection of these pieces. And actually, I heard this story that students with Peter Campus in New York said that he confessed they invented video installation art because they wanted to sell. So there has always been a market. It's not as developed as the market for printed media or other kind of more material sources, because for people it's a long way to think about buying something that you can get online, basically, or that you don't own as an object, and that it will probably, like a video piece, you might not be able to see it in 20 or 40 years. So there is a sense of, there are many challenges that the technology itself poses, but there is a market for media art, and there are many artists that sell a few pieces. I don't know many that live out of selling work. There are very few, but there are. And the market is growing, I guess.
Yeah, I think of Raphael Lozano Hammer, for example, who's definitely doing well through the sale of his works, which are complexes dans le fait que il s'agit d'un projecteur souvent, d'un ordinateur ou une autre plateforme qui risque d'être périmée à un moment donné. But yes, yeah. We have a question in here.
Yeah, ma question est un peu en rapport avec la précédente. I would like to know how would you define digital art? I mean, we had in these places at Arsenal, at Gallery at Askeran, at the Contemporary Museum of Contemporary Art, Jon Raffman, about a year ago or two, who painted paintings about like 3 panels together of computer keyboards, together with all kinds of other stuff on it. And so it is a very major artist. He's from Montreal, by the way, and extremely successful. And I think I would say that this is considered digital art. He's painting keyboards. So that's a world away from what all of you are doing here. How do you define digital art, cyber art, whatever, numerical art?
I might maybe start and then and people can jump in. But yeah, John Raffman, we're very familiar with his work. He's also done films in Second Life. He's also pillaged into Google, like the 9 Eyes of Google pieces, where he was going into all of that archive that exists and finding images that had meaning for him. He's a digital art. I mean, he's working with digital technologies. Let's just say, first of all, it's all art. I mean, we're getting into a time now where we want to get away from silos and disciplines. It's all collapsing. It's all just art. We're on this cusp, so because technology is being instrumentalized by artists in ways that we're still trying to understand the nature of any medium that comes up and how it impacts on artists' work. So we have a tendency also, because of the way art school works, art history, canons are entrenched, that we have to categorize these things. But I think we're in this period where we want to break it down. So artists who are using, maybe we should just say artists who are using digital technologies are artists, and never mind trying to define digital art. That's how I feel about it. Others?
I think it's the same, especially, there's artists, like young artists working with Instagram and all these kind of pieces that we will never imagine before Instagram existed, before YouTube. So there are all different uses that they are using them as tools. It doesn't mean that the impact of a computer is the same impact of this kind of tool or painting or oil painting.
Those are all technologies.
Yeah, but
in a way, a book is a technology.
Mm-hmm. But the interesting twist is, though, that this, like, oil painting never determined the economy of the world, and oil painting was never used for wars or to surveillance. So there are political aspects of technology that make it also a unique field of exploration for artists. But I agree with you in the sense that at the end, they're artists and they're framed within a smaller realm of digital art or digital art history, but they still, we're still borrowing from the same terms. We talk about aesthetics, we talk about the engagement with the spectator. So the questions, formal aspects of the work, so the questions are still the same. And in a way, it's also artists are reflecting and creating with the tools that they are using every day.
Are there any other thoughts to add to that from Jenny or Emily? Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe just that some artists would use, regardless of what material they're using, maybe the subject matter is addressing digital technology too, like you were mentioning about the keyboards as a subject. And I don't know, I think that's interesting to think about, like the non-digital way of addressing digital culture, like through as a subject too. And maybe, sorry, I'm not sure if that really is an answer.
I think that's really interesting, so that it brings us back to the beginning again, that if we're exploring digital technologies in terms of what they do to us, how they kind of discipline the body or get us thinking, changing our brains, even using smartphones. I don't need to, I actually rely on the smartphone to get me up in the morning, and I make notes with it. So it's changing, actually, using any kind of map kind of app to find things is changing our sense of how we negotiate space. So that's definitely, it all just definitely comes back to our everyday bodies, our everyday uses, and the way we interact with the world. I've completely lost the track of the sense of this.
No, but it does remind me that 20 years ago, when we were talking about new technologies, we weren't anticipating what was coming, and so the language that we use, it just doesn't apply in the same way, so that the language that we use to describe what we're doing has to change. And then I think it comes back to the first thing you said, which was breaking down these silos.
Maybe one more question if there is? No? Well, we'll close it up. We want to thank you so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure. I thank you so much to all the panelists
Thank
for
you.
giving us such great papers. Enjoy the fair and thank you for coming. Merci. Bon après-midi.